"Ah, to hell with it!" My wife spat and threw her fork on the ground. "Darling!" I cry and watch in both astonishment and horror as she trudges past me, her shoulders set forward and her heels clicking. "Don't darling me! Cut the crap! You know you and I will not survive this." She whipped around and spat. Her teeth were bared at me. Their perfect straightness and blaring whiteness seemed unnatural when she wasn't smiling. The way her nose was tensed with wrinkles exposed how ancient her skin really was under that makeup. Whatever do you mean?" I stutter and glanced past her down the hall. They were coming. I could hear it. Her attitude would certainly get us both killed. "Has any of the last 3 years penetrated your thick skull? Once they're in your home, there is no hope. The virus is too potent. We already have it if they do," my wife roared, flailing her arms around the halfway between me and the sounds of the dining room. The screeches of our maid Lou still come from that direction. My darling, we can fix this," I plead. "I will talk to the head of disease control, slip him something to make this go away. We are not doomed. We can simply go to the house in Milan and forget about this. Come now." "And is there a point?" She sniffed and faced the sounds, her legs stiff in dominant pose. In her red glittery dress, her back was exposed, painted in sensual charcoals, so soft and biteable despite her age. She wouldn't last a minute against those things. "A point? I know about Lou. You pay her far too much for just being a maid. To think all this time you never loved me," she sobbed. Oh, Antoinette, oh, my dearest." I sputtered between sorrow and shame and relief. "It's not what you think." "Oh, what is it then? Are you conveniently paying that girl 400% above normal rate just so you can dutifully ignore her skinny little legs and that short skirt of hers?" she shrieked and whipped around. Her makeup is ruined, dark streaks running down her face. Her nose was still crinkled and her midnight eyes were deeper than outer space. It wasn't her fault. I should not be quick to anger at the comment. After all, she didn't know. All this time, all those silent dinners of cabbage with vegetable patties, for 2 whole years, all of those little condescending hmms and ughs were all about this. I do believe I regret my choice. Yes, absolutely. That is my job. I don't believe that. Even now you lie to me, just as you've done before. Are there more little chicks you are keeping out of sight? The girl at the gas station, perhaps? The delivery woman, huh? Are you sleeping with them as well?" she sobbed. Around her stick-thin legs, something plopped onto the carpet. It rolled across the perfectly aligned wool pieces, sweeping in a turn, and went straight for us. I froze in terror. I heard my wife hiccup into silence, and she too watched it roll closer and closer and closer, slower and slower and slower. It rolled right up to her, settled flat on the floor, its face staring up at my wife. It is a California roll, a piece of sushi filled with crab and cream with a single slice of avocado neatly placed on the top, with the rice wrapped round it, held together with the freshest seaweed. It almost looked enticing if it had not picked up hair and dirt from the carpet. My breathing caught, and my wife held her hands to her face. We waited, and it didn't move. It leapt up from the floor with more force than I would have ever expected and splattered on my wife's dress. Its crab meat writhed and shifted, now mixed with avocado and rice. It reached out a slimy appendage from its body and grabbed forward at my wife's dress. She shrieked and hit the roll off her dress, where it would barely hold itself upright, and fell on the floor with a splat. It tried to rise again, no longer a sushi roll, but an abomination. My wife slammed her heel of her shoe into it. The heel went straight through. She yelled and stomped on it, taking it apart bit by bit with the heel of her Louis Vuitton. White splattered with the red underside of the soles, and all over the cheetah print outside. I gaped at the spot of ruined carpet. My hands were shaking. I was shaking. I patted my balding head with a pocket square. I thought they exterminated all of the undead. I thought the zombie apocalypse was over. I sputtered and pointed my finger at it. It was going to get us sooner or later. She kicked one good time for good measure. Hiding in the mountains with all of our money would have never been enough. The zombies would have gotten to us someday. We have been lucky so far. Is this lucky? I cried. Lucky our dinner came to life and tried to kill us. Very lucky, she insisted, with a dark look at me. I say good. I suppose I deserve this, and you especially. Darling, I was never sleeping with Lou. I will explain it to you later. I attempt to soothe her. Some of the sushi must have gone in my eye. I scratch it away and attempt to smile. She spit in my foot and glowered at me. Her lips were shut tight. There was no budging her. She was quite the stubborn woman, and honestly, very annoying still. A world without her. Oh, fine. She isn't my mistress, dear. She is my illegitimate daughter, I told her. What? My wife asked with a raised eyebrow. I had a child long ago out of wedlock. It was before I'd even met you in that yacht club. Back when I was only a boy. Lou came to me 2 years ago to meet with me, of course. But she specifically said she wants nothing to do with me. I gave her a job as a way to help her pay for her college without charity. My eye itches again. I scratch it without separating my gaze from hers. She must understand I'm telling the truth. She must. My wife gasped, and her snarl faded away. She was once again beautiful as always. Yes, and since, she didn't want to get in the way of our family and make things complicated, we didn't tell anyone. She would just be the maid, and I would never, ever cheat on you, A spine shot straight for me from around the corner. It was inches from my face. I halted as my eyes stared down the sharp white bones of a fish skeleton. The other half was in my wife's hand. She had stopped it from reaching me. She crushed it in her hands and let it fall to the floor. It writhed uselessly. I am so sorry, she cried and wrapped me in a hug. We fit like we were made in a factory, my roundness against her boniness. I love you, I growl into her gaze and pull her tight to me. You are the only woman for me. Our lips met. Her tears tasted sharp and savory, like soy sauce. Our lips moved together, sucking and sliding. Her tongue slithered against mine. The suckers pressed against my teeth and pecked at my tongue. Wait a minute. Suckers? I pull away, only to feel the tentacle lock tight in my throat. I look down at the small purple line between my mouth and my wife's. It's an octopus tentacle, hanging by tendons with chewed white flesh blossoming along its rubbery back. My wife's face is tense, and her eyes had rolled back. I try to speak, but the tentacle is around my tongue, and nothing understandable comes out of my mouth. I strain to look around the hallway. Tempura bits spilled onto the floor and are crunched under a mass of red and orange, and undulating white and green. It filled the hallway and shifted. It had most of its rice flesh behind. Few still clung to the Alaskan salmon and blue-fin tuna. Its form shot towards us, but fell short and clung to the carpet. I tried to move away, but the tentacle from my wife's mouth held tight. She was starting to turn blue. The pull was stronger as she became heavier, and her hands began to lose their purchase on my shoulders. I wrapped my arm around her and hauled her weight into mine. I was finally able to turn and stumbled away to freedom, to the front foyer. The door to sunshine was. My wife was heavy, my blood was ice cold, and the mass of zombified sushi was charging at me. The fish slapped against my Italian leather shoe and spread for me. I stomped on it. It made a popping squelch, and I nearly slipped. The top part of it was so soft, but the sushi underneath had turned to fused muscle. The soft parts reached up my socks and tightened with the strength of a marlin. I cried out in terror. I couldn't move any more. The slimy flesh was crawling up my leg and tightening around my ankle and leg hair. It had gotten me. I was so close to. I could see the glitter of my chandelier now, and where the entrance turned to marble floors. I just need to get a couple more feet and... So, you are a relative of the victims? The police officer asked the young man, so oddly out of place in a cheap t-shirt and fine dress pants. The officers surrounding the mansion had uniforms, after all. The discombobulation of the young man's clothing only added to the oddity of him being there. Yellow tape snapped and thrashed in the wind around the mansion, which had once lacked the unattractive color. It cordoned off the windows and front doors, separated the large armored vehicles, and the heavy-duty equipment used by the police. It was scarcely scant protection from whatever was slamming into the door of the house. The door feebly clung to its place, with all of the strength of its former tree had bestowed it. A mix of pink and green slipped through the cracks, mostly red. "I am their son," the young man insisted. "In definition alone." The cop eyed the young man warily, and the young man acted as if he never saw it. "And what does that mean?" the cop asked. "Oh, family drama aside, I am their son, though my father would say otherwise," the young man answered. "Ah, so hopefully nothing too sad?" the cop asked playfully. The young man raised an eyebrow. The cop's smile began to melt away, when the young man grew one of his own. "My mother, yes. I have no respect for my father," the young man said. "It's fitting he's dying this way, really. The scum." "Oh," the cop swallowed awkwardly. "At least you'll be inheriting all of this." "Oh, no," the young man laughed. "No, my father's bestowing this wealth to his mistress Lou." "His mistress?" the cop asked. "You are absolutely sure?" "Oh, yes, my father is a good liar, but I have always been able to tell when he is lying about something powerful. He gets an itch in his eye, some kind of tick he has." "Ah!" The cop nodded and shifted in silence with the young man. His eyes traveled over the property, its cactuses and red stones, the dust devils that pawed at the yellow tape. "And this thing is a zombie, correct? Shouldn't there be more power for fighting it?" the young man asked, and eyed the cops, who were far too nonchalant and miserable looking to be taking the slamming and slushing sound seriously. Many leaned on their vehicles, fanning themselves with the collars of their heavy armor. The heat seemed like a bigger threat to them than the zombie. "Nah," the cop shrugged. Then the door fell. The hinges still held tight to its charge, clinging to the wood that had become 4 pieces instead of 2. The young man watched on it in surprise the giant mass of pink and green. It was as tall as the doorway, glistening and slimy. Fresh, large human bones lined its front, caked in blood and clinging red flesh. It undulated, shifting the bones into a giant maw, which roared with depressing silence. The young man gasped and stepped back towards the vehicle he came up the dusty hill with. The creature was grotesque and drenched in blood. It had been hours, and the avocado tied in its flesh had turned brown, and its fishy smell was beginning to fester. The officers, on the other hand, didn't seem too concerned. Hands on their guns, eyes alert, yet still leaning, they waited. The monster charged off the front of the house and onto the marble stairs. It slithered down, aiming for the closest person behind the yellow tape. The moment it touched the roundabout driveway, it began to sizzle. A delightful smell filled the air like barbecue, and gentle smoke rose from where the flesh touched the ground. The sun, touching down on its back, made the slick on its flesh bubble and melt. The thing slowed instantaneously and reached for the officer so tauntingly close to it. It tore down the tape and pulled itself forward, leaving a cooked trail behind it. It shrank as it attempted to reach the humans. The bones inside it became more prominent and numerous. Then it turned golden brown and white. It stopped moving and collapsed. What in the young man swore, and squinted at the steaming pile of meat. What did you expect? It's L.A. There's no way that thing would last long in this heat. So all my father had to do was make it out the front door? The young man asked. Pretty much. It's almost tragic, really, the young man said. He turned away from the scene and smiled to himself. From his pocket he pulled the tail of a piece of tempura shrimp. Thank you so much for listening to the story, California Roll. Leave a like, maybe subscribe. I'm going to post these every month, so hopefully you like the next one, or the previous ones, or everything I write. Okay, awesome. Have a wonderful day.